Today on Throuple Talk, we are thrilled to have Katie Ziskind from Wisdom Within Counseling and Coaching talking to us about purity culture and its impacts on non-monogamous relationships. I have shared before how deeply indoctrinated I was by purity culture, but even if you didn't buy into it as hook, line, and sinker as I did, it deeply impacts a lot of us in ways we don't even understand. And so, Katie, we are so excited to have you here talking to us today and sharing your expertise on all of this and how it impacts us. So thank you. Welcome. And can you give us a little introduction?
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here with you guys. It's such an honor to be on your podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a relationship coach and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I help couples, non-monogamous, polyamorous, all different types of couples develop a secure emotional bond. Really work on things like talking about childhood pieces and connect in a vulnerable way, and also improve sexual intimacy, affection, and touch, as well as rebuild desire.
Awesome. So can you talk?
Amazing.
Yeah. Can you talk to us? Let's start with talking about how purity culture impacts us, maybe in ways that we don't even realize, especially for those of us who do want to have non-monogamous relationships, and some of the mental barriers and things that we might have that we just don't even recognize.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a beautiful point. It's such a great talking point because a lot of us, without even realizing it, are raised in a really strict conservative and religious upbringing. So we have messaging from a really young age, you know, around sexuality, around relationship structure. So a lot of times we're told, hey, like you're not allowed to have sex before marriage. And inherently in that is a monogamous marriage messaging, or we have to get married, or we need another person to complete us. A lot of times there's fear of, in some really strict cultures, even holding someone's hand can make you feel ostracized. You could be publicly humiliated. You could be an outcast from your church, your group, your community. There are fear-based messages around masturbation. We often learn that sex is taboo, that you shouldn't talk about it, that it's only for having children. It can't be a recreational hobby, in a strict religious upbringing, when it can be a wonderful recreational hobby. But we don't get education around body consent. We don't get education around alternative or different types of love that we can have, or different versions of ourselves that we can be with different people. And a lot of times when you grow up in a strict conservative religious upbringing, sometimes people will turn to pornography for sex education because everything is considered taboo or dirty. And so, porn doesn't show, it can be erotic and it can be a wonderful tool, but it doesn't show adequate foreplay for the female pleasure system. And porn doesn't really teach verbal and emotional communication skills around sex or love. But especially around, this very heavy monogamous messaging, we are told, from very early adolescent ages and teen years that this is the one quote unquote right way, or if you're different, it's not normal. So a lot of times when I work with people, it's like we're redefining normal. Normal is just a setting on a dishwasher. Right? There's no such thing as normal. You can create and co-create with your partners what works for you all. But yeah, strict religious conservative upbringings can play a role even in sexual expression. There can be a lot of sexual performance anxiety, sexual pain. Sometimes too in a strict religious and conservative upbringing, there's sometimes unwanted touch that occurs, and then there's blame put on the person. So maybe, they get told it was your fault. You were wearing too short of a skirt, or your shirt was too low cut, or you were the distraction. And so there's this inherent blame that is kind of fed in. So we have fear, shame, guilt, that can sometimes come, not for everyone, but for a lot of us. We're learning about this as we develop our adult self. And, even with a trusted, safe, throuple or quad or people that you are intimate with, there can be feelings that get in the way of enjoying those relationships and enjoying pleasure, of shame and guilt. So, a strict conservative religious upbringing can also, make someone doubt that sexual fantasies are okay, or make them think that, they don't get to have a voice during sexual experiences, or don't get to have a voice even in a relationship, when everyone can have a voice together. And sometimes there can be cycles of sexual avoidance or sexual rejection on an internal level, and then that shows up within the relational dynamic. So, I think this is a great topic.
For me, it was so deeply ingrained in me, which this has been a recent revelation, like within the last month, that I realized that I never really saw my sexuality as something that even belonged to me. It was like, being raised in the church, it was God's, it was something that was very spiritual. And then before I got married, my dad was like the protector of that. And then when I got married, it was my husband that was the protector of that. And then even as I transitioned out of the church and let go of those religious beliefs, the sexual ownership was something that was still like, it was so deeply ingrained and subconscious that I just didn't even think about it, didn't even realize like, oh my gosh, like this is something that I never even really tried to control. And then also you have that female sexuality is shameful and dangerous. Like, women that are sexual and turn heads, well, they're causing men to stumble, and that could ruin homes and, break up families. So you have all this stuff that's like, even if there's no truth to it, it's so deeply ingrained that you still behave as if it is true. So like just unwiring that is like, it's such a process.
There was a lot of responsibility put on the men, though, too. It's like you were told you're supposed to protect her heart, and if she's trying to dress like that, that's your fault. You weren't leading her. So I think it went both ways. Like we all got it. If you grew up with the church, and a girl dressed provocatively, or the wife of somebody, it's like everybody looked at him like, how did you let your wife do that? You're
right.
not the spiritual leader of your home, obviously.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah, I was hearing somebody talking the other day, like they're in an open relationship, and they were saying like they went out and some man asked her husband if he could kiss her. Like, who am I? Like, do I not have my own voice? Like, what is this world we're living in?
What if she didn't want to?
That
wasn't important.
Yeah.
Honey, men are talking. Making a deal right now.
Yeah. I was raised the same way, a very religious background. And even though in my home we were very open, I still had a lot of hang-ups when it came to sex, just because society around me was shaming women for being sexual in any way.
Yeah, it's very true. We're not taught like this is your body, like no one should be touching your body. Yeah, and there's a lot of, even if you walk into a church, a lot of times there's signs like you must be wearing a t-shirt or you cannot wear tank tops in this building.
Yeah. I was raised Orthodox, and they are very conservative. So you had to be well covered in church and wear like a headscarf, and very, very strict.
It seems like this, I'm curious, this seems like a new phenomenon. Like if you grew up in the 90s, you were a 90s youth group kid, you read the Josh Harris book, I Guess Dating Goodbye. And so this seems like a new, ever since that book Pure came out. What's the name of the author of that book?
Linda Kay Klein.
I think she kind of brought it to light, right? When she started realizing we all had the exact same problems.
Yeah, I don't know if she was the first, but one of the first to really start going around and interviewing women and finding out what the experiences were, and just finding like all these commonalities with women, especially all over the US, just all these same mindsets and messages. And yeah, whether you were reading I Kiss Dating Goodbye or all the other ones like Boy Meets Girl, and what was the Elizabeth Elliot, Passion and Purity, like all these things that we were all reading and hearing all these messages. And yeah, it's crazy to hear the wide variety of backgrounds that all have the same underlying messaging.
And recently we started interviewing Throuples all across the country. And this one commonality kept coming up. At least one person in each one of these Throuples seems to have been raised in an ultra conservative environment. And they have something with the purity culture. And we're like, what is going on? We got to start digging deeper on this. So
yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, a lot of our childhood experiences play such a huge role in our values, and it's hard too sometimes, with people I work with. It's like that culture, that religion is like a memory tied to like their grandparent or like these very, these religious leaders in their life. But then it's also like, well, what is this serving you? How can we kind of redefine what culture means, or redefine what religion means, or like take the good and then start to give you something that actually serves you and being your authentic self.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, oh yeah, go ahead.
I think it was in the book Pure, I learned about religious trauma syndrome. It's my understanding this is a condition that was discovered fairly recently. What do you know about it so far? And can you explain some of its causes and symptoms?
Yeah, so religious trauma syndrome, I mean, we can have, post-traumatic stress disorder develop from different experiences. We have big T trauma and little T trauma, but a lot of times the body will go into a state of fight, flight, or freeze. So, sometimes we see like fight as being kind of that, more of a conflict, a verbal conflict. We see flight being like leaving or this, withdrawing, and then freeze is sometimes what occurs in a sexual experience where, it's like that raccoon in headlights. There's an inherent like disembodiment because of purity culture and strict religious upbringing messaging. So there's fear, there's shame, there's guilt, and that fear response is kind of ingrained in the body from a young age. So let's say someone's told like, it's a sin, you're going to go to hell if you have sex before marriage. Like you're won't even be a member of this family anymore if you do that, right? And someone does that, and then, there's this fear inherently held within the body and the nervous system tied to that messaging and that belief. So that freeze response can kick in. There can be body pain, there can be, mental anguish, but it can create a fight, flight, freeze response that, we kind of have to unpack and we have to work through. And there can be trauma, belief-oriented trauma, but then also physical, like unwanted touch, like sexual trauma that can occur too. Yeah. And it kind of gets swept under the rug or dismissed entirely.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that I was even carrying any shame because cognitively, I always knew that sex within marriage was a good thing. And I was the epitome of the good girl. I waited until I got married, all that. So I knew that it was good, but the female sexuality as a whole was so deeply ingrained as something bad that for like 15 years, I had the vaginismus, and I had like significant trouble ever climaxing up until just a couple years ago. And I had no idea where these problems were even coming from. And then now as I'm unpacking it all, it's like I feel like honestly, like a piece of shit, like even suggesting that I have any trauma because I was raised in a home where I felt loved. I felt safe. Like, my parents taught me everything that they still to this day believe is right. So it's like to say like, oh, I had any kind of a traumatic childhood seems like, like, I don't know. It just seems like not right and doing an injustice to people who were truly abused. But at the same time, it's like, all right, well, I had these physical things in my body for all these years over an area that should be full of just nothing but pleasure and intimacy and all this. Like, so there's something to be said for, all right, there is some sort of, like you said, like a little T trauma at least. So yeah, how do we recognize that and fix that and move beyond this and not let it carry on to the next generations?
Right. I mean, I love what you shared. Like, that's so beautiful and so vulnerable that you're sharing that. I mean, that story is so common. And, like we can have awesome parents who were attentive academically, but they just fell off the wagon when it came to talking about sex or consent or, how to use protection or all of these things. And, a lot of times I think too, in a strict conservative and religious upbringing, like you said, females are kind of often, whether it's openly discussed or taught, or it's more ingrained and kind of subtle, women are taught kind of in this more traditional role to give and be in a, obey your husband, or, give sex whenever he wants it. And, there's also this kind of forfeit of female pleasure that occurs. And so there's like that obedience element to it, which,
Right.
that's
Sex
not
becomes a
enjoyable.
duty,
That's
right?
often- Yes, it
Yeah.
becomes a duty, becomes a chore,
Yes.
and then there's this avoidant, disconnected cycle where why are we, So usually females don't feel pleasure. They're uncomfortable, they're doing it out of obligation, duty, and then they don't want to have it. It doesn't feel good. So we kind of restore that through sex positive education and empowerment.
For me, it was so confusing because Josh is like an amazing lover. Like he's generous and he's curious. And like he spent all this time like, what feels good to you? Like like we're trying all these toys and he's trying to get me to think about things and communicate. And I couldn't do it, like no matter how hard I tried. And then eventually, actually, after we opened up, I talked to the first woman actually we ever had a three-way with. She told me that she was just like me, only like a year or two before that. She's like, I never used to climax from penetration. And then I had this, like she had a session with a tantric woman, and she helped her with like the muscle, all the internal muscles. And so eventually we hired somebody that came and helped me, and it still was like another like year or two. But yeah, they're like, okay, so you have like all this muscle atrophy, like all these nerves are just like either not receiving anything or they're receiving what should be pleasure as pain. And like once I realized that, like that was the turning point for me. I was like, I'm literally like receiving like these sensations and having to tell my body like, this isn't pain, this is pleasure. This isn't pain, this is pleasure. And then it was amazing. It was like a light switch. Like eventually it didn't take that long once I realized that to actually my body finally started receiving it as pleasure. It was like, boom, like just night and day difference. But the fact that shame could go that deep and affect it that significantly is just like, it's mind boggling.
Yeah, I mean, that is so beautiful that you wanted to kind of experience pleasure. And it sometimes takes like having guides or having support or like having someone else that kind of helps you be like, yeah, you can do this too. And yeah, our thoughts, like beliefs, the way we think about our own body and our own sexuality can really affect pain responses. Like we're kind of oftentimes trained from a really young age to see being sexually expressive or putting on that erotic hat, so to speak, stepping out of parenting or stepping out of paying the bills or building a career as like dirty. And so we have to kind of take that taboo label off and be like, this is a beautiful part of who you are, like being an erotic sexual being and exploring pleasure. And, it takes time. Sometimes positive affirmations can be really helpful. I deserve pleasure. Yeah. This is a very normal and healthy version of myself.
Yeah. So in your working with clients who are non-monogamous, how do you see the shame and sexual shame especially play out in those relationships?
Yeah. So I think in particular, non-monogamous couples like are doing a great thing trailblazing, right? Like there's almost this awesome culture where we have to like team up and be like, this is healthy, this is awesome. And non-monogamous couples, I think, they're amazing. But it's like we almost have to find our own community because it is a very, tricky thing. Some of the couples that I work with aren't out to certain members of their family because they do face, a parent cutting them out or being estranged or judgment and criticism. So I think there's that inherent element of like, this is special to us, that the couple units that I call it the couple bubble. So the couple bubble is like this invisible boundary around, the couple and however many people are in the couple unit. And it can be really strong through emotional bonding and security techniques. And it can also be really weak. But I think there's a sense a lot of times throuples or non-monogamous couples or polyamorous couples like almost kind of want to protect themselves and shield themselves from family members that may just totally not get it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is very disorienting. And I don't know if you can speak to this at all in your working with clients or just your training, but for me, I know it was very, very disorienting to not only pull away from the religion, but then consciously stepping into the non-monogamous realm and knowing that this is the relationship structure I wanted, but knowing that that's also leaving behind like really the whole community that I had forever. Like I knew certain family members would not ever accept it. Like even if they are still, on the surface, like, oh, well, we love you. Like it changes those relationships forever. So yeah, I don't know. Can you speak to that at all and how disorienting that is and how to kind of move past that?
Yeah, it's really tricky. So I do a lot of like family estrangement work and cutoffs and distance. It's a huge thing, it's really tricky. I love that you talked about that intersectionality between both, this religious strict upbringing and kind of that value system that certain family members or even friends may have. You may have friends that you've been really great friends with for 12, 15 years, but then, you're exploring a different relationship structure, loving multiple people. And for them, their own shame, their own guilt, their own monogamous heavy culture just prevents them from being able to be a good friend. But yeah, it's really hard. Holidays can be tough. A lot of times families have ingrained religious culture that's passed down. And so it's really hard when, you want to be accepted and you want to be that family member that, your aunts and uncles you've grown up with for years, and it can be really hard.
Right. We actually spoke about that, like having when you're going through a hard time, coming out to family and friends when they don't accept you, the power of building a chosen family, like surrounding yourself with people that get you.
Yes. And actually, we just launched a Facebook group called the Throuple Talks Connection Hub, specifically for especially throuples or those who want to be in throuples, just to kind of connect and start building that chosen family, even if we're all spread out across the world, but just having people that you can talk to about stuff like this.
Yeah, provide community and
knowing
support.
You're not alone. Yeah. Knowing there's others out there.
Facebook groups can be amazing. Yeah, Facebook groups can be so supportive. But yeah, the idea of chosen family is awesome. I think all of us kind of have our chosen friends and family, and sometimes even biological family members are not that close, and pets can also be a part of your chosen family.
Yep. That is something. Another commonality that a lot of throuples have pets. They love pets. That's a thing.
Yeah, the love, all the love.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, a piece of growing up in a strict religious and conservative upbringing, like you talked about, Char, is really getting back in touch with a healthy, connected, authentic sexuality, especially for vulva owners or females, and maybe even for penis owners too. But really gaining education, like females need, 45 to 90 minutes of foreplay. A man or a penis owner really only needs like 5 to 8 minutes. So, if partners just don't have sex positive education, their pleasure is like kind of out the window. It becomes that thing that people are avoiding or not knowing how to connect with themselves in that way. So yeah, there's the sexuality piece and then the relationship structure piece.
Right. And just the fact that the biggest thing that I have discovered sexually is that most women don't think they can have an orgasm. They don't think that they can appreciate like a sexual pleasure, and they don't even try. They stop trying just because the knowledge isn't there. And once you tell them, no, you can do it as well, something like it just shifts in their mind, and all of a sudden they start trying, and they do succeed, most of them. So yeah. That's where the education comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Yeah, we're not taught this.
Yeah.
It was definitely that way for me. It was like, I thought that was a part of me that I just didn't have. And I'm hearing also from doctors and stuff saying like, oh, well, the vast majority of women, I don't remember what the percentage is, but it's this very small percentage of women that do climax from penetration. Like, oh, okay, well, I'm just one of those.
I'm not even going to try, right?
That doesn't happen for. I'm like, that makes sense because it's never happened. And then once I found out like, okay, no, like every woman does have this capacity. I was like, oh, like, okay, so basically like my analogy is the light switch is turned off. So I just had to figure out like, where is this light switch located? And then boom, it was like, and then once it was on, it was on forever. Like you can always find it again. So yeah, it's something that the messaging, and I guess just overall female sexuality is so misunderstood. There's a book I haven't read yet called Untrue by Dr. Wednesday, I think it's Wednesday Martin. And she's been like researching all this stuff for years. I think she wrote, I think it was a New York bestseller also called The Primates on Fifth Avenue or something like that. So books that I want to read that like debunking all these myths about female sexuality. It's like, oh my God, I'm so glad people are finally looking at this and talking about this, because I think it's everywhere you look, you see so many people that are sexually frustrated, and it's coming across in all of our relationships and just everywhere. Like everything will be so much better if everybody's just having the orgasms that we all deserve, and the sexual energy.
Make love, not war, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's always the joke. What's wrong with her? Yeah, she probably needs to get laid.
She needs to get laid.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you think about it on like a chemical level, like your brain, when you experience pleasure and you have a supportive, caring, knowledgeable, generous partner or partners, right? You have oxytocin that gets elevated in your brain. That's your cuddle hormone. And oxytocin literally like relieves pain. Like, it's a pain reliever. There's serotonin, there's dopamine.
More cuddles. You hear that? I love cuddles. I'm always like, I want more.
Yeah, it's the best. Right? It's the best. And even like studies have shown like non-sexual forms of touch, like holding hands, will lower your heart rate. So there have been studies where like, if there's some sort of pain, having a secure bond with your partners, an emotionally close bond, touching, holding hands, having your partner's hand on your leg or sitting on their lap or whatever, that can make whatever you're going through emotionally or physically less painful. So it's really incredible, like touch, affection. And I think too, in a strict conservative religious upbringing, like we often see parents that don't kiss or don't hold hands or like lack of affection is normalized. So then we're not only dealing with sexual shame, guilt, and fear, we are disconnected from our bodies, and then we don't even realize it's okay. Like a lot of people feel embarrassed, like kissing in public.
Right.
Okay, well, let's work through this a little bit. Like, there's so much shame around expressing love in a public way. And it's a lot of times, it's not normalized from a young age. And like, if we're under that mindset of sex is for making a baby from a religious upbringing, like a lot of people skip over giving and receiving oral sex because that doesn't make a baby, but that is a beautiful part of a sexual experience.
Yeah. And just sexualizing any type of touch, like you're saying, like if you're hugging and kissing, it's not sexual. It's just love.
Yeah. Long hugs, I think, are so important. A lot of times too, on the more sex and intimacy side, couples are, throuples, quads, there's this beautiful step. I think when we're talking about non-monogamous relationships, I think people and individuals are like more interested in talking about sex in a positive way. I think that's a great thing. But even before that, I think a lot of times we're, without knowledge, right? We're kissing for 3 minutes and then we go right to penetrative sex. And it's this really unpleasurable. There's no sexual satisfaction for a female partner, but there's also a lot of, just it's quick, it's done. I talk a lot about aftercare too. And how important that is, like cuddling and touching and caressing, talking, that aftercare is something that people aren't taught about, and that can really improve bonding and security. So education is so great.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations for resources on that?
On aftercare?
Aftercare and just the bonding and I don't know, I guess just everything we're talking about here, really.
Yeah. So I love, so I'm like Gottman trained, Sue Johnson, emotionally focused couples therapy. I love Dr. Tammy Nelson. She's very much in the sex therapy world. But in terms of emotional vulnerability and talking about these things, like I think Sue Johnson, she does emotionally focused couples therapy, and she talks about like expressing needs. And, a lot of times sex for different people means different things. Like for one person, sex could be, I feel really safe and reassured. For another person, sex could be, I feel great pleasure and this is so playful. And there's a different need that's, comes from that. Dr. Tammy Nelson is great when it comes to broadening the conversation around non-monogamy and polyamory and just making sex something that we can talk about. Like, just like, we talk about paying the mortgage or talking about daycare for the kids. It's like, we want to talk about sex and what do you like? What are your fantasies? What haven't you tried that you've always wanted to try that's on your bucket list? And I think that can evolve into non-monogamy as well.
That's right. Yeah.
I know for me, like I was raised in the culture I was raised in, I really wasn't even ever allowed to have any needs or desires. Like that was seen as something that was selfish and you should only be thinking about Jesus and what you can do for the kingdom of God. And, it's all about selflessness. And like, it was so frustrating for Josh for years. It's like, what do you want? What do you like? What do you need? And it's like, oh, I don't know. I don't need anything. I'm good. No. And then it's just giving myself the permission, to finally actually look at that. Like, who am I really? What do I need? What do I want? Like,
but I think there's also a lot of fear, at least where what I'm thinking, like, even if my partner asks me, what do you want? I would still be scared of really speaking up because what if they don't like me anymore? Yeah. When I'm going to tell them something that maybe they don't like and they think, oh, really?
Yeah. Or what should I want?
What do you want me to want? That's going to be okay with you. So you can still love me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful point that both of you are talking about. Like, and that kind of comes into kinks and BDSM and sexual fantasies and, letting go of our own judgment. I do think a strict conservative upbringing can lead to a lot of judgment around, kind of what's normal. Mm-hmm. And then like, we even have an inner judge, right? A lot of people have internal shame and guilt around trying certain things or, for some people, it's like using a sex toy. They're really afraid to use a sex toy because it means their partner's inadequate or they're cheating or they're, there's all these negative messaging or they'll never be able to orgasm from a human ever again if they use a sex toy. And so like, there are all these bite-sized things that, we're told. So it's like, go to a sex shop, buy the sex toys, try it out. They're different sensations, right? These are just different ways of getting connected and getting embodied and being in tune with yourself. And, I think culture too puts a lot of pressure on people, to do what's publicly acceptable.
Right.
And so this is like connecting to yourself in a way that's unique. It's like, if someone wants to get more connected to their sexuality, like self-pleasure is a wonderful thing, but it means making time for it, right? Maybe leaving work a little early, maybe putting the kids to bed early, mm-hmm. like setting aside 2 hours, massaging your body with oil, like doing a self-massage, like finding your own erogenous zone. Yep. I mean, like, I really love this area of my body caressed and kissed. And, it really turns me on when I do this to myself, and then I'd like for you to try it. And
yeah,
right. So there's that communication.
So I've been always wondering, like, where is the disconnect when I was raised fairly open in my family, but everyone around me, the society, was not. And I never truly believed that sex is shameful. But that's one thing that I was believing. But then deep down inside, I've had shame related to sex. Mm-hmm. And there was something that I knew it wasn't wrong. but I still had it. It took me years. Like even like recently, I still discovered little tidbits of shame connected to sex, even though I never believed it. So where is that? I never could understand where is that disconnect between how I think and how I feel.
Yeah.
Like if you can give me some insight into that, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, there can be many pieces to that. And that's beautiful too. Like it's awesome that you were raised in an environment where sex was really talked about and you felt good in your body and connected to yourself in that way. But there can be even the media, social media, advertisements, right? We see very traditional, even commercials, drug advertisements. All of these things are very, very culturally, kind of putting female sexuality on the back burner, right? And I think too, there's also this piece of, when we have certain sexual partners, right? We learn a lot about ourselves in relationships, right? And it can be a gift to have a sexual partner that sees you and is patient and reassures you and compliments you. But sometimes people have a sexual partner that is critical and tells them their body smells bad, or there's trauma related to that can be deeply internalized for years. Having a partner, like we all have bad breath in the morning, right? But like I'm a big fan of like, making out and kissing and affection, and like we're humans, we have organic smells to us, but we're not always going to smell like mint, but it can be nice of a breath mint or whatever. But a lot of times people like if a partner says your breath smelled really bad, that can last with them for decades, right? Or so we really have to talk about like complimenting each other, and so those things can play a role. And sexual shame can also be from different messaging we've received, just culturally and society wise.
Right. So they're like, how I see it is like things that you're like wired, like it's a subliminal messaging. Like you don't even realize you're receiving it. And no matter what you think, they're still going to be in there. You're still going to have to fight them.
Even in just choosing this relationship structure, even though like I'm not at all ashamed of this home or family, obviously it's beautiful. It's exactly what I want and I choose. But knowing that other people outside this home would not see it the same way, and they do see it as something to be ashamed of. Sometimes in interacting with people, I feel ashamed of, or like embarrassed to say anything because, oh, what if they're going to see this as something that's negative? Or what if they're going to judge me a different way, knowing that I'm living a life that doesn't align with what they see as wholesome and acceptable. So just that.
Yeah, we all want to be accepted, no matter, like I see people like rebelling, and it's just like in the end, we just want to be accepted. So we're going to live our lives and through that prism.
Yeah, and I think there is that we all have that wanting to belong and wanting to have a community, and knowing too that if, let's say, someone doesn't value your relationship structure, doesn't value you having choices and choosing a non-monogamous relationship style, like, you get to decide the distance that you want to create with that person. Maybe they serve you on a smaller level. Maybe you start to attract other people that are more like you. We're always evolving. You may have a friend that, was a friend for a season. Maybe they were a friend for a short period of time. And then the true people, like, I think for all of us need to know that, like, your true friends will accept you no matter what, will want to let you know how special you are in their life, like how meaningful and how much you matter.
Yeah.
And if people don't, then, I think you deserve people that let you know how much you
can kick
matter.
Right? What's the saying? If those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter. But that's easier said than done sometimes, depending on how close they are. So.
It's true. It's hard. And so then I think it's just, maybe it's certain conversation topics or knowing their triggers, developing that awareness of, can we do this together? But then maybe, it's hard. It is hard finding those boundaries, but the people who love and care about you will want you to be successful and support all forms of, expression.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of us are coming to terms with as well. It's like, even if loved ones never really understand, the more that we come out there and we are open and honest and people see how loving and supportive our relationship is, the more they start to realize like, okay, maybe this isn't right for me, but maybe I was wrong to judge it as something that is not okay for anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a beautiful thing. And, sometimes it's hard when you feel criticized for a personal choice, such as a relationship style, to not feel rejected, right? It's normal to feel rejected and it's normal to want to belong. It's okay to feel sad, but, responding to those people out of anger or like getting into that fight mode never really does any good. So just like you said, like showing them by leading by example, and ideally relatives, friends can meet all your partners and have a wonderful, unique relationship with each of them. And, there can be this sense of care and compassion that's passed around.
Yes.
So I have a question, Katie, for people that feel sexual shame and they want to take the first steps to deal with it. Do you have any tips or tricks, anything that they could do to get started on the path, like maybe journaling or talking to someone or something that they can do like on the spot, like to make themselves move on and feel better and move towards healing?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a beautiful piece to starting to gain awareness, right? So listening to material about, sex positivity, gaining education, understanding like, foreplay, understanding and owning that, being like, I'm a vulva owner. I need 45 to 90 minutes of foreplay. Looking at what foreplay might mean, is it making out? Is it sending dirty texts? Is it watching pornography? Is it self-pleasure? Is there, building that hype, building excitement? Sex can be a pleasurable, amazing, erotic experience. It can be liberating. It can be exciting, but sometimes we might have a thought that comes in that says, oh no, this is wrong, or you shouldn't be, doing this thing, or, there are these thoughts that come in. So we want to kind of notice them, work through them, and noticing that fear response as well. So, there are mental pieces, cognitive pieces to exploring sexuality. I think when I work with people that have like pain, right? Penetrative sex can be painful when you've had like beliefs that are fear based, and there's this clenching, like the whole nervous system like clenches down, and it can make things really uncomfortable. So, exploring fantasy is exploring that foreplay component, reading erotic books, reading erotic novels. I think so. I used to work with kids in therapy like 6 years ago, and when they go through a death, we read a book about a dinosaur that had a family member that dies, right? So bibliotherapy is actually really, it's evidence-based. Adults can do it too. When we read books about other characters, like even if it's a fantasy character, right? They're, maybe there's like a mystical or sci-fi element to it, like whatever genre, like read erotic novels, like they might turn you on. You can start to develop confidence. You can start to explore, their erotic novel podcasts, like audiobooks, and explore different parts of your body, play with your breasts, play with your nipples for 20 minutes, see what that feels like. What type of touch do you like? Do you like fingernails and scratching, or do you like more of the fingertips and that softness of the fingertips? And, I would definitely, if someone's exploring their sexuality, incorporate self-pleasure, masturbation with no obligation to orgasm, but if it happens, it may happen. Like I would, think about it like going to the gym, right? So if we're going to try to like develop muscles, we do need to do it regularly. And the mind and body connection to sex organs is the same way. So masturbating like 2 to 3 times a week, setting aside time, preparing the mind, knowing that, if someone has a really high stress job, like they're going to need time to take off that hat and switch into an erotic space. So that self-pleasure experience can be a great way to understand what's, you need on an individual level to develop that connection to your sexual side and kind of let it out. having a sense of emotional safety, emotional bonding, and security with your partners is also really important. So if there's any criticism or there's the silent treatment, we all get triggered sometimes. But I think that if there is any stonewalling or defensiveness, it just starts not feeling good. Yelling's happening or these negative, dysfunctional forms of communication. That's the fight, flight, freeze response kicking in. We're like, okay, something's not feeling good. So really work on building emotional safety and security. And that transfers into your sex life too. So with all your partners, it can be really helpful to have emotionally bonding conversations. So sharing your deeper fears and insecurities. So if there's anger or there's tension or yelling, there's usually a deeper need for reassurance, comfort, and security. So, with couples that I see, there can sometimes be challenges even around one partner wanting more sex than the other. And instead of just, shifting into this avoidant rejection cycle, we talk about like sex can be really comforting. Sex can let me know that I am still attractive to you, that you find me desirable. And we all want to be seen as desirable. We all want to be seen as attractive, especially from our significant others. And, there's this sense of, sexual activity is sometimes a metaphor and has meaning of like, I want to work on us. I want us to grow together. Like I want to engage in this beautiful, amazing, pleasurable activity. So talking about what sex means. And when I say sex, I mean so much more than penetrative sex.
Right.
Yeah.
Just sexual activity in general.
Nice.
So affirmations, like saying I deserve to receive pleasure. It's okay for me to be relaxing right now. I think a lot of people have the ongoing to-do list that flies into their brain and that can really take them out of their body. So saying like, I'm feeling your hands on my back. I'm feeling your lips on my clitoris. I'm feeling your hands touching my belly, right? I'm feeling all the things in the present moment. Naming those things out loud can be helpful. Sometimes medications can also have effects and side effects regarding sex drive and libido. So always working with a prescriber to better understand your dose and never coming off anything cold turkey. But allergy medications can lead to vaginal dryness. They kind of drive the mucus in all parts of the body. So using lubricants can be wonderful and pleasurable. And everyone can try all different types of lube. I'm a huge fan. But also SSRI medications or antidepressant medications can have side effects of low libido. So that can play a role in sometimes, needing a little bit more foreplay. And I think a lot of times in our culture too, we have such a focus on penetrative sex, like penis and vagina sex being this like end goal or what we're getting to. So like being able to have a voice, saying like, hey, like I need more foreplay, or I'd love for you to give me a massage, or, I don't want to end in that way. I just want to be able to take a shower naked with you and us wash each other's hair. All of us get here together and not have it necessarily end in the same way every single time. So, sexual activity and exploring relationships, love, right? It's a fun experience. It doesn't have to be something that we have to check off this list so then we can just go to bed or there's a sense of fun. I mean, you think about it as a fun thing, like it's a present moment, fun activity to explore. Giving
It's an exploration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of the exploration and kind of circling back to what you were saying about reading erotica and stuff like that, I wanted to just note something that I've noticed in myself. It's like I tried the reading erotica, and I noticed that there were certain things that I would be reading and I was like, oh no, like, it would turn me off for some reason. And later on, I realized that sometimes I was doing that, like, because there was something else, not necessarily that it's like, okay, this doesn't turn me on, but it was actually something related to shame. So once I realized that, I kind of started re-exploring it and going back and reading things with a new set of eyes. And if I did read something that was like, like making me want to stop. It was like, I would kind of, I guess, just stop and look at, okay, why is this bothersome to me? Is this like some kind of a mental block that shouldn't actually be there? Or is it just that this just isn't something that turns me on? And sometimes it was, sometimes it was one way and sometimes it was the other, but exploring that led to opening new things and breaking down some of those mental blocks. So yeah, I think I would say for any listeners out there who have been like, well, I've tried this, like, well, if you tried it already and it didn't work, like maybe don't write it off forever, or talk to Katie and she can help you. And Katie has a podcast also. What's the name of your podcast?
Sex
Katie?
Positive Podcast. All things love and intimacy.
Yes. Love and intimacy. Yeah. Yeah. And I love what we're talking about. I mean, it is, sometimes harder said than done, right? Like going to the bookstore, getting an erotic novel, like that can be a huge step, right? So little baby steps are wonderful. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And then you do one-on-one coaching and couples coaching, Throuple coaching as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And then your website is wisdomwithinct.com. And we'll put all this info in the show notes as well. But
yeah, I love working with couples of all kinds. When partners are committed to growing together, it's such a beautiful experience. So it's such a pleasure to be able to help couples really build emotional security and talk about sex and slow it down and invite more pleasure, right, through the safe container of relationships.
Yeah. There's so much room for growth. And it is one of those things that when you are working on yourself and working on your relationship, it really does just keep getting better and better. So.
It does. Yeah. And it's like when you have beautiful relationships, it's almost like a renewable resource for continuing to grow more love. And, you can have the safe space to use your imagination to explore fantasies and bring in elements of mystery and novelty and diversity and suspense. And it's like, you get these special people in your life and you get to explore yourself. You get to explore their erogenous zones and their landscape and their body. And, there's also that mental intimacy piece that's really important for a lot of people.
Awesome. Well, Katie, did you have anything else you wanted to share with us today before we wrap up?
I wanted to say that if you are struggling with fear, shame, guilt, any anxiety related to your sexuality or sexual expression or sexual things that you like, it's really normal. You're not alone. A lot of times we, it takes time to connect to our sex life and our sexuality. And, there can be many different pieces, if you're struggling with sexual rejection, or you have an avoidant partner, or you're wanting to open your relationship, or it hasn't gone well, or you're trying to form a really close, secure throuple, like all of these things, you can have a range of human emotion, and there's normal emotions. You can laugh, you can cry, you can be yourself, you can express what you're feeling in a calm way. You can, be your erotic, sexy self, and then you can go to work and be your professional self. And it's okay to be all these different versions of you. And the most important thing is to communicate and build that secure bond, and know that you're not alone if you're feeling a little bit shameful or anxious about who you are and your sexual side.
Yes.
That's great advice.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes. Katie, it's been such a pleasure.
So much.
Yes. Awesome. Yes. And as I mentioned, we'll put all of Katie's contact information, including her Insta handle and links to podcast and website and all of that in the show notes.
If you like our podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share our episodes with people just like yourselves.
Please leave a comment and let us know what resonated most with you. And if you have any resources that you know about to help with this, please let us know and we can link it in the show notes as well.
We'll see you next time.